The year is 1849. British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard is digging through the ruins of Nineveh, the ancient capital of Assyria, once the largest city on earth. From the dust, he lifts broken clay tablets. He has no idea that in his hands lies one of the greatest discoveries of all time. Decades later, in 1872, a young museum assistant named George Smith stands before a London audience. He begins to read a story from those tablets. A flood story. And it was written thousands of years before the book of Genesis. For the first time, clay spoke with a human voice. And that voice changed history forever. But if clay could carry voices across millennia, what other secrets might still be hiding in the mud? Welcome to Echoes of Time. Before anyone could hear the voices of Sumer, the writing had to be unlocked. In the 1830s, Henry Rawlinson scaled the Behistun Cliff in Persia and copied inscriptions carved in 3 languages. That was the key, and once the key turned, the tablets began to speak. In Nineveh, Layard and his assistant Hormuzd Rassam uncovered thousands of tablets, the lost library of Ashurbanipal. Then came December 3rd, 1872. George Smith read aloud a flood story that shook Victorian London. A man warned, a boat built, waters raging, and life surviving. The crowd gasped, newspapers screamed, and the world began to wonder, was this history or myth? Writing didn't begin with poetry. It began with paperwork. Around 3500 BCE, temples tracked grain, flocks, rations, and workers. First with small clay tokens, then with seals, then with signs pressed into wet clay. In Uruk, thousands of early tablets were found. At first, they were just numbers, lists, inventories. But lists grew. Lists learned to speak. And soon, what started as counting turned into storytelling. Then it began measuring something else: behavior. At Tel Abu Salabik, archaeologists uncovered tiny school tablets. On them were 2 texts, the Kesh temple hymn and the instructions of Šuruppak, a father's advice to his son. Do not steal, do not speak lies, respect your neighbor. Imagine it. 4,500 years ago, a father's voice carved into clay, and we can still read it today. But was this just education? Or was humanity for the first time trying to carve morality into stone? A society doesn't just write what it values, it writes what it fears. In Sumerian myths, the gods labor. They grow weary, and so humans are made. From clay, given the spark of life, to carry their burden. One of the earliest flood stories, the Eridu Genesis. Centuries later, the Epic of Gilgamesh repeats the same story in Tablet 11. Same flood, same survival, same questions. So were these stories memories of real disasters, or simply theology shaped as myth? Archaeology steps in. At Šuruppak and other sites, flood layers dated to around 3000 BCE have been found. Not a global event, but enough to destroy entire river cities. Texts speak of overwhelming waters. The earth itself shows flood deposits. Side by side, they echo each other. But if the soil confirms some parts of the story, what about the parts that remain unproven? On Sumerian carvings, strange figures often hold what looks like a handbag. Ancient technology, or something else? Scholars explain it was a ritual bucket, used with a cone-shaped object to sprinkle water on palm trees, because the palm was life, food, shelter, survival. Far from alien tech, it was a ritual of fertility and renewal. The same symbol appears at Göbekli Tepe, in Assyrian palaces. Even in Mesoamerica, the Olmec carved a figure holding a handbag motif almost identical in form to the ritual buckets of Mesopotamia. And Hindu gods are often shown carrying the kamandalu, a sacred water vessel used in rituals of purification and renewal. Its purpose echoes the same idea: water as life, water as survival. So which do you believe? A relic of lost technology, or a timeless symbol of survival? George Smith's reading in 1872 didn't just shock the faithful, it sparked a public debate. For the first time, flood stories were not just a matter of belief, they were something to compare. Text against text, myth against history. From that day, ancient voices could no longer be ignored. In Oxford's Ashmolean Museum sits a clay prism, the Sumerian King List. It begins with one bold claim: kingship descended from heaven. It names rulers who reigned tens of thousands of years before the flood, then resets after the flood, moving kingship from city to city. This was more than history, it was also politics. A way to legitimize power by rooting it in the divine. But why shape the record with myth instead of fact? Was it faith or a clever strategy? Hundreds of thousands of tablets survive, many still unread. Some were written by royal scribes, others by students carefully copying the classics of earlier centuries. It was this tradition of copying that allowed hymns, laws, and stories to be preserved across generations. So when we read a Sumerian hymn today, we are still hearing the voice of antiquity, carried faithfully through the hands of many. And what those voices reveal are patterns that repeat. Sumerian imagination went far beyond ledgers. The goddess Inanna descends to the underworld, dies, and returns. A cycle of death and rebirth. The Babylonian Enuma Elish tells of a god slaying chaos and creating order, and these motifs echo worldwide. The Norse world tree, India's sacred fig, China's cosmic mountains, the shaman's central pole. So do all these myths share a single origin? Or is humanity everywhere asking the same eternal questions? Flood traditions appear everywhere: in the Hebrew Bible, the Quran, in Greek tales of Deucalion, in India's story of Manu, in China's legend of Yu the Great, in Aboriginal Dreamtime myths. Each is unique, each has its own theology, but one thing unites them: a world drowned in water. So is this a memory of shared history, or a universal fear written into every culture? The tablets also speak of the gods gathered in councils. In Sumerian, the Anuna. In Akkadian, the Anunnaki. Some texts even divide them from the Igigi, higher and lower ranks of divine beings. So who decided the fate of humanity? Who decreed destinies? That is the question for our next episode. What we know is this: writing was born in Uruk, first for counting, then for laws, then for literature. The earliest surviving works include the Kesh temple hymn and a father's instructions to his son. The flood appears in Sumerian and Akkadian. The king list claims power descended from heaven. Each tablet is both history and myth. But in the end, the decision is yours. Do these tablets preserve the world's first history, or simply humanity's oldest stories?